Okay, so here we are on the bottom of Chav Zayin Amid Aleph in Meseches Tamid. We began discussing the previous shiur, what the Kohanim would sleep in. We quoted the Mishnah, and the Mishnah taught us Lo Hayo Yeshenim Bebigdei Kodesh, and that's where we're going to begin, which is about 14 lines from the bottom of Chav Zayin Amid Aleph, the two dots. Start with a little bit of Chazara, that the Mishnah taught us that they would not sleep in their Big Day Kodesh. Rather, what would they do? They would take off their Big Day Kodesh, fold it up, place it under their heads, and sleep in their Big Day Chol. So we begin the Gemarah, which again, we're beginning with a Chazara. We started this Gemarah last time. Says the Gemarah, from the fact that the Mishnah says they would not sleep in their Big Day Kodesh, Sheina, sleeping, who delight, sounds like that is what you're not allowed to do excuse me, in your big day kahuna. Aval, however, hiloch, but walking around in your big day kodesh, mehalchin, from the Mishnah it seems you are yes allowed to walk around in your big day kodesh. What would that indicate if you're allowed to walk around in your big day kodesh? Says the Gemarah, from there we could prove shemas mina, we could prove Big Day Kahuna Nitnu Lehanois Behen. We could prove that what? You're allowed to have benefit. Why are you allowed to have benefit? Because it sounds like, what are you not allowed to do? You're only not allowed to sleep. But are you allowed to hang out? You're allowed to walk around? It sounds like yes. So the Gemarah wants to prove from the fact that the Mishnah says you cannot sleep is a proof that you could only not sleep, but are you allowed to get other benefit, other enjoyment in your big day kodesh? The Gemarah wants to prove yes. Says the Gemarah, no raya. Amri, they said, hu adin dafilu hilach namilai. Really, you're not allowed to chill. You're also not allowed to hang out. You're not allowed to get any form of benefit from your big day kodesh and the kohen clothing. V'hadik etani. And that which the Mishnah said, Lo Hayo Yeshenim, that they would not sleep, is why? Misham Debai lives they say, because the end of the Mishnah wanted to say, they would fold it up and put it under their heads. So it wanted to tell us the process of the Kohanim going to sleep. Kotani Reishanami. So the beginning of the Mishnah also said, Lo Hayo Yeshenim. Asks the Gemarah 1 second. V'hagufa kasha. The Mishnah itself contradicts itself. Why? Because where would they place their big day kodesh? The Mishnah said, what would they do? They would take off their big day kodesh, fold it up, and put it tachas rosheim, underneath their heads. Says the Gemarah, if they put it under their head, what does that mean? That means their kohen clothing was what? Their pillow. If their kohen clothing was their pillow, that means they're getting benefit from it. Says the Gemarah that itself should prove Shema Mina Big Day Kunan Ilanis Behem. The Gemarah answers, Ema Kineged Roshayim. So where would they place their kohen clothing when they went to sleep? Did they use it as a pillow? The answer is no. Where would they place it? Kineged Roshayim, opposite their head. So says the Gemarah, it sounds like right now, are you allowed to get any benefit from your kohen clothing? The Gemarah wants to say no. Says the Gemarah, Amar Rav Papa, this is new Gemarah. We're 5 lines, let's go everyone, 5 lines on the bottom of Chav Zayin Amid Aleph. 5 lines from the bottom of Chav Zayin Amid Aleph. Amar Rav Papa, teaches Rav Papa, Shema Mina. We shall learn from this din. Says the Gemarah, Tefillin, just like where would you place the kohen clothing when they went to sleep? Do they put it under their head? No. Where do you put it? Next to your head. Says the Gemarah, if one were to go to sleep, and let's remind ourselves, Bizman Chazal, Bizman Gemarah, do they only wear their tefillin when they davened? No. When do they wear their tefillin? 24/7. Well, not 24/7, not on Shabbos, and not when they slept. But when do they wear their tefillin? Always. So says the Gemarah, where do you put your tefillin when you went to sleep? From the same way that you're going to put your kohen clothing where? Right next to your head. Where seemingly should you put your tefillin when you go to sleep? next to your head. So Amar Abba, Shema Mina, let's learn from over here. Tefillin, we're 4 lines from the bottom of Chav Zayin Amid Aleph. Tefillin min atzad sharinon, that you're allowed to place tefillin on the side next to your head. Why would you not be allowed to put your tefillin next to your head when you're sleeping? You're not wearing them. What's the concern? Dilma v'loy chayshinan, and we're not worried. Dilma migander v'nafal alayu. What happens when you sleep? Do you stay perfectly stationary? No. You might roll over. Maybe you're going to roll over, and we're going to roll on top of your tefillin. The same way we just said that we're not worried that you're going to roll over onto your kohen clothing. Similarly, should not be worried. You're going to roll over onto your tefillin. So says Rav Papa, let's prove from our sugya that when you go to sleep, where do you place your tefillin? You place your tefillin next to your head. Says the Gemarah, Hachinami mistavro. And this is as well logical. 3 lines from the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Says the Gemarah, this is logical that where they place their kohen clothing, Dikineged Roshehem, they would put it next to their head. Why is that logical? Di Amrit, if you're going to tell me, Tachas Roshehem, if you're going to tell me that they place the clothing, words aren't working this morning. If you're going to tell me that they placed the clothing where? Under their head. What's the problem? Nehi, very good. Very good that seemingly maybe you'd be allowed to get benefit from the clothing. But there's a different problem. Typically, you know why it should be usher to sleep on top of the kohen clothing? Mishom isura deke layim. Cause there's an isur kilayim. What's kilayim? Shatnez. Which part of the kohen clothing had Shatnez? Who remembers? Anyone? We'll see in a moment. The avneit, the belt. The belt of the kohen clothing had Shatnez. So says the Gemarah, there's a different problem with using the kohen clothing as a pillow. What's the problem? Forget about the issue whether you could or you cannot get benefit from the kohen clothing. There's a different problem. The Shatnez. And Shatnez you can't get benefit from. What do you mean? But the kohen is wearing it. So if you're going to hold that the belt, which we'll see in a moment, is made out of Shatnez, that's a specific allowance for the kohen when he's wearing it, when he's doing the avodah, to do what? To be wearing something with Shatnez. But would that allow you to sleep on it and get benefit from it? Absolutely not. So says the Gemarah as we turn over to Chav Zayin Amid Beis. Chav Zayin Amid Beis. Ha nicha, we're middle of the raya, middle of the proof. Ha nicha leman da'amar av neita shel kohen gadol. Loi zehu av neita shel kohen hedyot. It's a machlokes what the belt of the kohen hedyot, a regular kohen, is made out of. It's conclusive that the belt of the kohen gadol was Shatnez, had wool and linen in it. But the question is, what about the belt of the kohen hedyot, of the regular kohen? So ha nicha leman da'amar av neita shel kohen gadol lo zehu av neita shel kohen hedyot. It's good according to the opinion that says they're not the same. If they're not the same, what does that mean? That means the belt of the kohen hedyot was not Shatnez. If it was not Shatnez, then it wouldn't make a difference if you slept on it or not. But it is the same thing. So then, of course, you would not be allowed to sleep under it. Why? On top of it, because it's Shatnez. So it's another reason to prove. That. Good morning, Rabbi Brody. That's another reason to prove that. Where would they sleep? On the clothing? No. The clothing would not be their pillow. Rather, what would the clothing be? The clothing would be next to their head. Next to their head. But there was a big hanacha, a big presumption the Gemarah just made. If I were to ask all of you, are you allowed in the chairs that you're all sitting on? What if the chair cushion that you were sitting on is made out of wool and linen? Would that be a problem? You'd be like, oh, I don't know. What's the issue of Shatnez? So we know Shatnez, the problem is wearing Shatnez. Is the same problem of wearing Shatnez, having it on to sit on, to sleep on? Is that the same issue? Says the Gemarah, it's a massive machlekes. Says the Gemarah, V'chi tema, 4 lines down, Chav Zayin Amud Beis. V'chi tema, and if you're going to say Kalayim, when it comes to Kalayim, again, Kalayim and Shatnez are interchangeable. Kalayim, well, if you're going to tell me that when it comes to Kalayim, Ba'aliyah, that only, what is Aliyah? Aliyah means to go up, to put the clothing on you. If you're going to tell me that the issue is putting the clothing on you, Ulevisha, and wearing it, Huda Aser, both of them, excuse me, Aliyah means going on top of it. Ulevisha, and wearing it, Huda Aser, that's what's Aser. Aval. However, Meimach Tutei, to place it underneath you, like we just spoke about. What if the cushion of your chair was Shatnez? Aval Meimach Tutei, to place it underneath you, Shaper Dummy, is not Aser. Then our discussion would not apply. Because what are we discussing? Where are we putting these Shatnez kohen clothing? Under your head. We're discussing whether you could utilize it as a pillow. Then we would not have a raya. The Hatanya, but says the Gemarah, but we learned in a Braisa, Lo Ya'ale Olecha. This is the source when it comes to Shatnez. What does the pasuk say? Lo Ya'ale Olecha, that a garment of Shatnez should not be brought upon you. What does that teach us? Says the Braisa. Aval, however, when you were reading the Torah, you would think, what's Aser with Shatnez? To wear it. But what about to utilize it as a cushion, to utilize it as a pillow? You would think it's no problem. But Avalam Ruchachamim comes along Chazal, and they teach us Aser la asois kain. You're not allowed to put it underneath you. Why are you not allowed to put it underneath you? Why not? The Torah said, don't wear Shatnez. So what's the problem with having a cushion made out of Shatnez? Says the Gemarah, you know what the problem would be? Shema, perhaps, tikarech nima achas. One strand of the Shatnez, of the kalayim, will go al basari. You're all sitting on a cushion, and as I look around, maybe there's a cushion, which there isn't, but maybe there's a cushion that popped. And coming out of the cushion is a thread. So now you're sitting on it. What's the problem? Okay. What happens? The thread goes up, and now it's resting on your leg. Now, you're not only sitting on the Shatnez, now the Shatnez is on top of you. So said the Chachamim, not only is Shatnez also to wear, but Gezerah, they made a decree, you cannot sit on it. Why can you not sit on it? Because maybe one strand will come on top of you. V'chi tema, and if you're going to tell me, demafsik midi, okay, maybe you're right, it's also derabanan. But how do you take care of that issa derabanan? If I were to tell you, okay, everyone, don't sit on your chairs. Why not? Because maybe there's going to be Shatnez. And what's the problem if there's Shatnez? Maybe one strand is going to come out and go on your leg. So you know what you would tell me? And I would say, okay, but figure out the rest yourself. Would you all sit on the floor? No. What do? You would take two paper towels. You would take a towel. You put it over your chair and you would sit on it. Now, if there's a towel over your chair, is it possible that the Shatnez is going to come up on your leg? No. So says the Gemarah, V'chi tema, and maybe you're going to tell me, Demafsik midi, maybe you're going to tell me that there's something separating between yourself and the Shatnez, and that's why it's mutter. So similarly, the Kohanim, maybe when they slept on the Shatnez clothing, maybe it was their pillow. But maybe the reason it was allowed was because they put something separating between their head and their clothing. Amar Rav Shimon, says Rav Shimon, we call this the princess and the pea. Teaches Rav Shimon, Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi, Amar Rav Yosi ben Shaul, Mishum Kehila Kedaisha. This is a long-standing tradition that they passed down from the Kehila Kedaisha, the holy congregation in Yerushalayim, Sheba Yerushalayim, She'afilu eser matzois, even 10 mattresses. 10 mattresses. Zu al gav zu. Not one mattress you stole, not two, not three, 10 mattresses. And what's underneath them? And under all 10 mattresses, what do you have on the bottom? Kalayim tachteim. You have one little piece of kalayim. You have a little piece of wool and linen under 10 mattresses. So is there any problem? You'd say, of course not. The Torah said, don't wear it. The Rabbanan said what? Don't sit on it. Why not? Maybe one strand will come on top of you. But 1 second. If there's 10 mattresses, is it possible for anything to happen? Of course not. Says the Gemarah, still, Aser lishain aleim. Still, it is Aser. Why? Why is it Aser? This is a classical example, a great example, that when the Rabbanan make a Gezerah, we don't start figuring out, 1 second, Gezerah, but maybe it won't apply, maybe the reasoning will apply. On Shabbos, there's a million things we're not allowed to do because Shema, you might come to right. So maybe you'll tell me, no, there's no concern because of this, because of that. No. It's called the loy plug. When they make a Gezerah, the Gezerah stands always. Elishmami, no. Rather, what's the proof? So we're keneged Roshayim. So it must be, says the Gemarah, that it's mistaver. It's logical that when the Kohanim slept, where do they place their clothing? Not underneath their head, but rather next to their head. Let's just finish up. The Gemarah says, not so fast. Iba Yisema. Answer number 1, I'll tell you is, meaning answer number 1 to prove that it's not a raya, is what? Ba'oisan she'ein bahen kalayim. It said the kohen got undressed, took off his clothing, and he slept on it. So maybe I'll tell you, very simple. He slept on all his clothing as a pillow, but the one garment, the belt, the havnate, the one garment that had Shatnez, maybe that garment he didn't sleep upon. So we don't have a raya, says the Gemarah, because we don't necessarily know that he slept on all his garments. But he said, she'ein bahen kalayim. Answer number 1. And Rav Ashi Amar, a different answer, a difficult answer. Says Rav Ashi, big day kahuna, kashin, hein. Big day kahuna were hard, and therefore, Da'amar Ravuna B'rei Rav Yeshua, hanamte gamda de narash, a certain type of thread from a place called narash, sharia is not an issue to sit or sleep upon. Why? Because there's no gezerah. We just said that if you have 10 mattresses and there's one piece of Shatnez underneath it, then there's a gezerah. But what if the thing that you're sitting on, what if your cushion wasn't a cushion? What if it was rock hard? Then Rav Ashi holds there's no gezerah. Why is there no gezerah? Maybe one strand will pop out. Says Rav Ashi, there's only gezerah in a case where it's potentially possible. So if you have 10 mattresses with one piece of Shatnez underneath, there it's potentially possible. You just figured out a way to get on top of 10 mattresses. But if it's hard, says Rav Ashi, then there'll be no problem. And Rav Ashi held that in our case, we're talking about the big day kahuna was made out of that material, and that's the reason why you're allowed to sleep in it. So the quick wrap-up is, what did we discuss today? We discussed the fact that when the Kohanim went to sleep in the Beis HaMikdash, we talked about the Pirchei Kuna. Where do they go to sleep on? The floor. What do they sleep on, the Mishnah taught us? They took off their big day kodesh and they put them under their head, we thought, and they slept on their big day chol, in their weekday clothing. The big discussion is, where exactly do they place those big day kodesh? Was it a pillow or not? If it was a pillow, then what would the problem be? Number 1, you're getting benefits from the big day kodesh. Number 2, what about Shatnez? So from here we learned out two incredible dinim. Number one is that they put it next to their head. Similar, if you were to take off your tefillin and want to take a nap, where do you put it? You can put it right next to your head in your bed. You might roll over and hit your tefillin. We see that we're not concerned about that, number one. Number two, we learned that with regard to Shatnez, we would have a raya that there would potentially be no issue sleeping on it, but the fact that it would be next to your head is the raya that there would be an issue, like we saw the princess and the pea, that even if there are 10 mattresses, one piece of Shatnez underneath, it is still forbidden. We had two answers why it's not a raya. Either it was only the garments that weren't kalayim, or it was Ravashi that they were hard garments which cannot potentially go up on their clothing. We'll pick it up.